I don't know what exactly it is about Sandhill Crane chicks, but I get excited every time I see one. A few days ago, I was out with my husband and we came across this little crane family in a parking lot. And of course, we had to stop and watch. I mean, look at them. The babies are so cute and fluffy when they're young that they almost look more like huge baby chickens than sandhill cranes. Adult cranes are pretty common where I live. I see them all the time. But the chicks are a different story. I only see them a certain time of year, of course, and so it always feels like a treat. Especially when they're just casually strolling through a parking lot like they own the place. And this wasn't the only young bird I'd stopped to watch recently. Not even close. Over the past few weeks, they've been showing up everywhere. One of the things I've loved most since I started bird watching is that it's completely changed the way I experience this time of year. Around this time, the butterflies start showing up again. The afternoon rain rolls in almost every day, and everything starts looking greener. And quietly, almost without anyone noticing, the baby birds start showing up too. Most people probably don't even realize what's happening, but once you start paying attention, it's hard not to notice. And one of the first birds that tipped me off this year was the brown thrasher. Last year, right around this time, brown thrashers seemed to suddenly take over my backyard. I hadn't seen many of them for a while, and then all at once they were everywhere. First, the adults started showing up again, then the fledglings. And before long, it felt like every time I looked outside, there was another thrasher running around the yard. A few weeks ago, I started noticing the same thing happening again. The adults came back first, then I started seeing the young birds. And after a while I thought, wait a minute, didn't this same thing happen last year around this time? I made a video last year about the brown thrasher taking over my yard, so I went back and checked the date when I published it. And sure enough, it was almost the same exact time of year. So yeah, apparently the brown thrashers are better at being on time than I am. These days, I find myself looking around my backyard for them whenever I'm out. And most days, they're not too far away. Sometimes it's an adult scratching in the leaves, which is always fun to watch. And sometimes it's one of the fledglings following behind. Before long, I started noticing the same sort of thing in other places too. One of my favorite sightings happened at a local park where we found a family of red-shouldered hawks. The park has some really nice trails, so you'd think that's where we'd find the hawks. But the nest was actually in one of the busier areas. There were people casually walking around with no idea that an entire hawk family was hanging out overhead. What made it even better was hearing the young hawks. They have this little high-pitched call that's pretty similar to the adults, but it's squeakier and babyish. And once you hear it, it's hard not to smile. I see red-shouldered hawks around my neighborhood fairly often, even in my backyard. But I haven't seen any babies near my home, so it always feels like a pretty special find whenever I spot them out somewhere. And what really stood out to me was how many people walked right past them without ever noticing they were there. Meanwhile, we stood there watching for who knows how long. But of course, some of the baby birds showing up lately are a lot more familiar. The cardinals are some of the most reliable birds in my yard. They're usually the first birds to show up in the morning and the last ones to leave in the evening. When I first got interested in bird watching, I got pretty attached to one cardinal pair that visited the yard regularly, and I named them Ami and Lily. At the time, I felt like they were the only cardinals that came to our backyard because I would only ever see one male and one female at a time. Whether that was true or not, I don't really know, but what I do know is that now we get far more cardinals around here than I could have ever imagined. But even so, they're all still Ami and Lily to me, every single one of them. When I first started noticing the cardinal babies, I actually tried to name all of them too, and that lasted for about 5 minutes. There were just so many of them. At some point, I just had to accept defeat, and I decided that once they grow up, they could all just be little Amis and Lilies too. The cardinals raise multiple broods here, and every year, there seem to be more and more babies. And once the fledglings start showing up in the backyard, it's like they're instantly everywhere. On the feeders, in the shrubs, hopping around the yard, calling for food, fluttering their little wings, just causing general cardinal chaos in the cutest way. After spending the last several years paying closer attention to nature, I've started noticing little changes throughout the year that I wouldn't have given much thought to before. When the butterflies come back, when the afternoon rain becomes a regular part of the day, when the brown thrashers return, and when the yard suddenly fills with baby birds. Those little moments have become some of my favorite parts of the season. They're happening all around us. And somehow, every year, they still manage to surprise me. Take care.